Good evening and welcome to Tuesday, September 24th, regular City Council meeting. D. Stiles Elliott, will you please call roll?
Mayor Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember DeLira.
Here.
Councilmember Fajarin.
Here.
Councilmember Gaither.
Here.
Councilmember Guido. Here. Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
So tonight we have a number of community announcements. The first one is WashDOT's replacing railroad tiles tomorrow. So on Wednesday, September 25th, the crews will be replacing the rubber railroad tiles on the tracks across Southeast Bishop Boulevard with asphalt. This work will take all day. Traffic disruption is expected to be minimal as traffic will be shifted to the middle lane as needed. The outdoor irrigation season, and we believe it's already this time, ends September 30th. Summer irrigation season in Pullman runs from June 1st through September 30th. Please remember that hand watering while physically present is the only allowable method of outdoor watering outside the established irrigation season. We have coming up the last of 5 open houses, discuss the potential changes to Pullman City zoning code and gather input from the public on the types of middle housing they support in their neighborhoods. This will happen at Sunnyside Elementary School on Friday, October 4th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. This open house was previously advertised as being on Saturday, October 5th, so please note the change in date to Friday, October 4th. Location and time will remain the same. And now's the time to register for fall activities. There's still space and quite a few fall activities for kids and adults that start in October, including junior NBA basketball, mini hoops basketball, 4-on-4 volleyball, 5-on-5 fall futsal, and a variety of, I don't know that one, variety of new classes, including bar and yoga. Visit PullmanParksandRec.com to learn more and register. And then at the library, dementia and memory loss care specialists from Aging and Long-Term Care of Eastern Washington will be leading a workshop on the key to a joyous holiday at Neal Public Library on Tuesday, October 1st from 5:30 to 6:45 p.m. Next up on the agenda is non-agenda related community comments. This agenda item is the first of 2 opportunities during this meeting for the public to bring comments to the attention of elected officials. Specific, this item is reserved for public comments concerned or other information not related to a previous public hearing or final action on this agenda. Final action items are the ones that are included in the consent agenda, regular agenda, and the regular agenda items. And this agenda item for comments is not to exceed 30 minutes in total. Is there anyone who would like to provide a community comment at this time on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to, yes, so if you, and this is not related to something that's on a final agenda item? Then if you could please come up to the microphone. And you'll have 2 minutes, and please state your name, and if you can, sign in the back when you're done, just so that Dee gets your spelling proper in our minutes. With that, please.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Michelle Kelly, and I'm a partial owner of Michelle's Closet in downtown Pullman. I wanted to take these 2 minutes to speak with you this evening because it has been brought to my attention that maybe some of you may not be aware of how everybody's doing downtown during the construction that's going on the past few months. I think myself and a few others going into it were actually really hopeful. We knew that we estimated our business sales going down about 30% going into it, but thinking that we could weather it. My business even changed locations to hopefully weather this storm. And got into a new location that was smaller, but that way we could make it through the construction. Talking to a few of the other businesses, they are being hit even harder than anticipated, including my own business. I'm in my 6th year of owning Michelle's Closet. We are down 70% in sales for all years previous, and we're actually doing even worse than COVID. And I also talked to 6 other businesses to include Cure & Co., Monarch, Terracotta, Palouse Country Candy, and a couple others, and they range from being down from 40% in sales to 80%. I'm not able to say the names of these businesses, but we do have a separate group chat for companies in downtown Pullman, and there are 6 that don't know if they're going to make it through the next 2 months on the other side of this construction. So I just wanted to come and make the city aware of what's going on. We did have the opportunity to talk to the economic developer about a month and a half ago, and when we discussed our numbers and what we anticipated and who possibly won't make it through the end of the construction, he was surprised. And so I want to take this time to come out and let you all know about what's going on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to provide comments at this time for a non-agenda item? Please.
I'm Sandy Castle del Conte, and I own Brews Books in downtown Pullman, and I'm not sure when we're supposed to talk about different things here. I just had a couple of thoughts and questions about the land lease that you guys are
So
going to
there'll be
talk
another time for the land
There
lease.
is going to be time
Yes.
for that today?
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
separate for agenda item things.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Thank you.
I know it can seem confusing that there's 2 different opportunities for public comment. Is there any others? If not, we'll move on to city council member comments. And with that, I'll start down with Eric. Councilmember Fajarin.
Thank you, Mayor. I have, comments or future agenda
This is
I
comments.
apologize. No comments.
Councilmember Parks.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make the public aware that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse will be having several community activities and be present tabling at other events. And so you can go to atvp.org to see more, and of course, can always contact us with any questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
No comment?
Councilmember Guido.
Just want to repeat what I've been saying for a few sessions, is a reminder that we are having a homeownership resource fair on October 5th, which is a Saturday, 1 to 4 at Gladish, and it's all about resources that are available that people may not even know that are here in Pullman and throughout the state. No commercial lenders, it's all nonprofits and government agencies that would help with things like down payment assistance. For our Muslim friends, there's information about halal financing, and just got a plethora of information. So really encouraging people to turn out for that and invite your neighbors.
Councilmember Weller.
No comment.
Councilmember Delira.
No comment.
Councilmember Gaither.
No comment.
Okay. With that, and I don't have any comments for the mayors, and now on to city council future agenda requests. So at this time, I believe Councilmember Fajarin, you have one you'd like to make?
Thank you. I have 2. First off, I'd like to extend an invitation to the Whitman County Assessor to come to City Council. Recent efforts to update assessed property values have led to a much higher property taxes for many constituents in a short amount of time, and Pullman constituents have requested that Council become part of this conversation. So I would like to invite the Assessor to Council to explain the process of how the county is catching up property to its true and fair value.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, so with that, it'll be, I'll work with staff to get that on agenda. And then, Councilmember Fajarin, you said a second one?
Thank you. I would also like to extend an invitation to Northwest Justice Project to come and present on services they offer to Pullman constituents. Northwest Justice Project provides free legal assistance to address fundamental human needs such as housing, family safety, income security, healthcare, education, and more. We do have a local satellite office that many of our constituents don't know about, so I'd like to extend our invitation for them to come to council to present on the services they offer.
Okay, is there a second related to that?
Second.
Okay, so I will work with staff on that. Are there any other future regular agenda requests? Seeing none, we'll move on to now the second community comment time. So this is the community comments on final action items of the agenda. This agenda item is the second of the two opportunities during this meeting for public to bring comments to the attention of the elected officials on any agenda item that the City Council will take final action, excluding items where public comments was previously accepted. This item for public comments is not to exceed 30 minutes in total. With that, if anyone would like to provide public comments on any items that are final agenda, and now would be the proper time. So, Sandy, I'll let you start since you were up there first.
Well, again, I'm Sandy Castle Del Conte, I own Bruce Books, and I just had a couple of thoughts when I was reading through the resolution for the land leases that are being proposed for downtown. Well, not for downtown, it's for the entire city of Pullman. One of the thoughts is I don't understand why there is a 250 square foot restriction to the space. I think that restriction might actually impact businesses that are already have sidewalk cafes, and the potential future sidewalk cafes that are going to be in downtown and throughout Pullman. It seems like a very small space. So I'm curious, if there's that limitation, can businesses then rent 2 lots or 3 to expand that space? Is that going to be a part of the definition that's in here? And also, is it limited by building or by business? Can only one business have 1 lot? Can one building only encompass one lease? Or are there going to be multiple leases allowed around a building? Then we have large buildings that have several businesses around them and in them. Those are my main questions. I have talked to a number of business owners, and I am getting the feedback that it seems like the jump to $200 a year is a pretty significant jump from the $10 a year that the few people who paid a lease. That seems like a large jump, and it'd be nice if it was less, especially during this time when we're all kind of struggling. Anyway, thank you.
And when we get to that agenda item, I'll ask staff to address those questions. Is there anyone else who would like to provide comment?
Hello, everyone.
Chris?
I think I know most of the people up there. Some of you I haven't met more than just passing by. Chris Chandler, Neil's Flowers and Gifts, Neil's Coffee and Ice Cream. I'm also here to talk about land leases downtown. Right as soon as they were announced, I had reached out to RJ Lott and asked him, hey, do we have any ideas? We're going to try to plan to get through this thing better on the other side. And I was said, okay, it's going to be similar to your current lease. I went through 120 years of documents at Neil's Flowers and the old sweet shop and everything else. I've never found anything. The only thing I ever found for any kind of a lease for the sidewalk was a permit that we had to draw a crude drawing and just basically show that we had liability insurance to use the land, or to use it. So if somebody falls off our chairs, it's our liability, not the city's, which I completely understand. There are chairs. And then I reached out again, right as all of the tables and chairs and everything were asked to come off at the start of the project. And I asked, hey, can we just have it through Parents Weekend? No, that wasn't going to be a thing because it was a construction zone, so we understood that and moved it out. And I said, hey, is there any way we can get any information on this at all moving forward? And just so we know what's going on. Oh, we'll get you something through the summer. And then this last week, I finally said, hey, the community update came out, or for the business owner update, and it said, hey, you can start applying the first, contact RJ, to get information on this, and I got back an email that I felt was kind of condescending, saying nothing will be available till the 1st of October, and by no means can you move anything out on the sidewalk. I hadn't moved, I mean, I know that it's not going out there till November when the project's actually done. But my concern is that we're doing this, like, we only take out 48 square feet of space. But, so, under those calculations and everything for there, I'm only gonna need a fourth of the space or that. And my other question is why are we using Spokane as a comparison and not Moscow? Moscow currently on their land lease is $125 permit to start and $25 a year, and then it's $55 every continuing year after that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to provide, please?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members, for your time again. My name is Michelle Kelly. I'm the owner of Michelle's Closet downtown. And I have a couple questions in regards to this same issue about the land lease. So my first question is it only to restaurants, or is it to all downtown businesses, retailers, and other businesses alike? And then my second question is there a possibility to have a waiver for the first year for downtown businesses due to some of the businesses I listed previous have already taken out home equity loans, closed retirement accounts, or used personal funds to keep their business open right now? So I'm wondering if there's a possibility to have a waiver for the first year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mitch Chandler, and I haven't been back to a city council meeting for 25 years.
Used to be right up here.
My comment is, like I say, I've been on Main Street 50 years. Permits have never been required except for those who've had to have alcohol service, and that's a state ordinance. And the only reason we had a permit before is because of the COVID, and Mayor Johnson asked for it. The other question is, if we don't have a land lease, I know the Downtown Association has bought beautiful tables and chairs. If we use their tables and chairs, do we need a lease? That's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to provide comment? Seeing none, we'll close community comments, and for there go on to our first presentation, which is the financial education piece. Jeff Albrecht, our Director of Finance and Administrative Services.
Thank you. Good evening, council and attendees. So this is kind of a little bit of a series of educational things that we're doing both for council as well as community benefit, especially as we're going into budget, but just in general to provide some updates and more kind of understanding of how public finances work, because there's a lot of complications within a city. So tonight we're going to really talk about fund and cash balances. So this kind of builds off of some of the previous ones that we've talked about and is certainly relevant as we go through budget process. So we've talked a lot about funds in the past and the different uses of money and where those come from, as well as some of the revenues. And now we're going to talk about balances and reserves. The funds, again, are there to segregate activities for reporting compliance. So there is different reasons for the different funds and different restrictions on the balances. But it's really important to have a good cash balance because you need that in case of emergency, and you also need it to invest properly in capital. So if you're just bringing in the same amount of money every year as you're spending out in operations, you're not going to have enough money to invest in the capital that needs to be done within a city. So that's where those balances become really important. It's also important if case of emergency happens and you need to not be able to have to stop operations immediately because you're out of cash. So it's always important to have that balance. At the end of the day, basically a healthy cash balance provides you flexibility, it provides you options. So when we have cash or fund balances, there's basically 5 different designations for that money, and this is done by the state auditor, so these are the definitions. So there's non-spendable. Basically, that's an amount that you can't spend. You have that cash, you really can't spend it on anything. The example for us is we have a Lawson Gardens endowment. So we can't spend the principal. We can spend the interest earned off of that account, but we can't spend the principal on that account. It just has to sit there, and its only function is to earn interest. We have restricted. So these are kind of the most restrictive to the least restrictive is kind of in the order they're in. So restricted is usually subject to some type of external restriction. A really good example of this, currently we're soliciting donations are being solicited to build Veterans Memorial Park. So obviously when somebody donates that money, they expect it to be used to build Veterans Memorial Park, not for anything else. So you have to use it for whatever that was designated for. So again, pretty restricted in what you can use it for. Assigned has specific purposes. This is a lot of our funds, our utility funds, for example, they have to be used for that. So when we bring in money for water bills, it has to be used for water projects or infrastructure operations. It has to be used for that specific purpose. Then there's committed. These are typically self-imposed. So the top ones are really restricted at a higher level. Most of the committed funds are restricted by the council themselves. So you have a little bit more ability to make some decisions in there. Example of this is we chose to commit CIP funds, so money for future capital funds that come in out of property tax revenues for sales tax revenues. So that's an example of committed. And then unassigned is your lease strings. I don't want to say no strings because all the money seems to have some strings attached. But that's your remaining cash. This is typically in the general fund, and that's usually the most flexible. And again, the general fund tends to have the most unassigned cash, which also means it tends to have the most demands on it because of that. A lot of the funds fall entirely into one of the categories, so a lot of the funds are restricted, committed, or assigned based off of that fund. Most of your unassigned dollars are in the general fund. So this isn't a perfect example, but gives you where most of the money lies within a fund. Some funds will have multiple areas. What I put up here is where most of the funds, so it's not 100%, but it'll give you an idea. So again, most of the general fund is unassigned. Most of the street fund is assigned, so it needs to be used for street projects. Your civic improvement fund is committed, and that one's a little unique. It is committed in that the council decides kind of what it's used for, but there is some restrictions on it by the state as far as what it can get used for. So it's fairly loose, but does have some restrictions. We do receive some money for firefighter pensions. That is restricted. That can only be used for that purpose. And then you see our proprietary and inner funds there, those are all assigned. So again, all that money in that funds needs to be used for the purposes of those funds, whether it's a utility, transit, and our inner funds. Metro Parks is a little unique. It's unassigned in the fact that it can be used for anything, but because it's a Metro Parks district, by definition, it can be used for anything that's a park. So it's a little unique in that way, but because it is a separate district entity, it is unassigned within that. And then we have our cemetery funds, and then as I mentioned earlier, the Lawson Gardens, which again, we can't spend that principal. So that just gives you a little bit of idea of kind of the restrictions of the money. I put the strings on the side because there's always some strings attached to the money. So talking a little bit more about a cash reserve. So again, it's critical to properly fund capital. If you don't have cash reserves, you're probably not investing properly back in the capital, and that really is a detriment to the sustainability of the community. The other thing to have good cash balance is to maintain or avoid interruptions in case of unexpected events. Discussions in the council in the past have kind of said about 13% operating is a good number, and that probably is, and it can vary a little bit depending on the circumstances. But really what that does is it allows us something unexpected. Let's say for some reason something major happened and there was a big delay on property tax revenue being distributed to us. If we have a reasonable operating cash balance, we don't have to stop operations. 13% would probably let you operate for about a month and a half without any revenue. And that way, if something tragic happened, you can continue operations until whatever that issue is gets resolved. So you saw that a little bit during COVID, where we had some sudden delays in revenues, and the city was still able to operate during those times. Funds that have heavy future capital needs probably require higher than a 13% balance. Our utility fund, for example, there's some very significant capital needs out there in the future, so we better have more than a 13% because we need to be able to manage those capital needs. The levels of our fund balances, and I'll show you some examples of where we are last week, but I want you to know those can vary greatly based on when we run the report. So it's a snapshot in time. So if I run the report the day after a payroll, it's probably going to be a little less fund balance. If I run it the day after we get our October property tax deposit, it'll probably be higher. So just know that those can vary within a month or even a time of year, so just keep that in mind. We do have the ability to invest our cash reserves, and we do that. It's very limited. It has to be very safe options. Basically, it's limited to local government investment pool, which is a statewide investment pool that's available to us, or bonds. So we can't be putting it out in the general stock market or those types of things. It obviously needs to be very safe. So the good news is it's very safe. Obviously, those typically have a little bit lower returns than you'd find for some other investments, though. So this is our funds, various funds, and we group a few of these together for various reporting purposes. Again, I want you to emphasize this balance was the balance as of last week. When we do a projection, we will take a look at where we're going to end the year, because some of these can really fluctuate based off of time of the year or even time of the month. So it's a good snapshot, it's a good look at it, but it's not perfect, and I want to kind of emphasize that right now. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of where we're at. The target operating reserve, again, is a little bit in flux. That's based off of where we're looking at and developing the operating expenses for next year's budget. That's going to fluctuate a little bit too as we continue to refine that budget. So this is really to give you some conceptual ideas. Don't focus on the exact specific number. So right now in the general fund, most of these balances are pretty good shape for the most part. Always would like to see them better, don't get me wrong. Cash is, always provides the most flexibility. But we're in a reasonable spot right now. But we do have a lot of stuff coming at us down the road, for example. So if you look at that general fund, currently it's at $13 million. About $5.8 million of that is ARPA funds that will get expended for the downtown project over the next few months. So that's going to draw down significantly. So it is a healthy balance now. You can see quite a bit above the targeted reserve, but that's going to draw down significantly here. Street fund, again, reasonable balance, but that one does, the ones that are bolded on there, so the street funds, the utilities, the stormwater, the EOD, and the cemetery, those are all ones that have fairly significant capital needs coming up in the next few years. So that's why those are bolded. We want to definitely have a higher balance in those. So the other thing you'll notice is most of our 500 funds, which is our inter funds, are pretty low. We bill out twice a year for inter-fund services, so they've incurred about 9 months of expenses, but only about 6 months of revenue to date. So just know that those look a little lower than they'll actually finish the year. But again, I kind of wanted to show you where we're at. Utilities obviously has the majority of our cash. It also has the majority of our capital needs going forward. So that just gives you a little bit of idea of where things sit today. This will continue to change significantly over the next few months as we continue to bring in revenues and do projects and have expenses. So kind of in conclusion, the fund balances are really critical to the future of the city. Good fund balances are what's important for making sure we have a bright future. They're going to provide sustainability, and they're going to avoid or minimize disruptions to the city in case of emergencies. And they really do, again, allow us to properly invest in capital projects. So again, just a little bit of a snapshot. We'll have some more conversations about fund balances as part of our budget discussions that will happen forward. But I wanted to give you a little bit of education of where we're at today. And again, overall today, we're not in a bad place fund balance-wise, but we have a lot of demands coming at us through either projects or increased costs and some of those types of things. So that, I'll take any questions.
With that in, so Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Jeff. As always, great information for us. My question is in regard to the Civic Improvement Fund, and that is the fund that houses the LTAC dollars, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And how often do we receive those funds from the hotels?
Monthly.
Okay.
So it's a monthly tax deposit.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any others, so thank you very much. Any last words?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next up, RJ Lauder, Community Development Director, on 2024 housing legislation.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Mayor. This is the third annual, believe it or not, housing legislation update. I've done this the last 2 Septembers. So housing is obviously a very dire need for the community as it is statewide. So I find this especially appropriate in 2024 to bring this forward to the City Council. Since we've got 3 new council members this year, I thought we would do another recap on what some of these shorthanded acronyms may mean. HB, very simple, House bill. Senate bill for SB, S is substitute. 2 or 3 would mean second or second substitute bill. E's engrossed. Senate joint resolution, House joint resolution. And perhaps most importantly, GMA, which is the Growth Management Act of 1990. Pullman is not in a growth management county. Whitman County, along with other low population, slow growing counties, are not in GMA. So before I begin, there were many bills coming out of Olympia that went through Olympia. So this is about as much as I could pare down and still cover a wide breadth of what was happening over there in Olympia. So let's start with the past bills. Bill 1998 was an act relating to legalizing inexpensive housing choices through co-living housing. Requires a city or county planning under GMA, so Pullman would not be required to do this, to allow co-living on any lot allowing at least 6 multifamily units. Bill 6015, an act relating to parking configurations for residential uses. Size and location of parking changed. Parking in rear yards, which may not have been allowed in some jurisdictions. Gravel not excluded as a surface material, etc. We also put up there the dimensions of what Pullman has for parking. Currently, it's a 9 by 20 for parking. Bill 2071 was an act relating to residential housing regulations. Requires the State Building Code Council to create 2 technical advisory groups for amendments to multiplex housing. This prohibits off-street parking for some, including for those for tree preservation. Bill 2321 was an act related to modifying middle housing requirements and to define what a transit stop is. It modifies provisions for middle housing and minimum residential density. It does not apply to critical areas or their buffers or watersheds serving a potable water source that is threatened under the Clean Water Act. More past bills from Olympia. Bill 6059 is an act relating to the sale or lease of manufactured home communities. Updates for notices to owners to compete for purchase. It's very important for those owners. Removes restrictions for tenants who receive assistance from sources that exceed max amounts under relocation coordination program. There was a lot in the last year or 2 for manufactured home communities, and this is really building upon that. Bill 2375, an act relating to accessory dwelling units that qualify for senior property tax exemptions, allows for 1 detached accessory dwelling unit to be included as part of the senior citizen and disabled persons property tax exemption and deferral programs. Bill 1890, an act relating to housing authorities. I know Councilmember Guido and I have talked about housing authorities in the past. This allows for legislative authorities that have created housing authorities by a specific time frame to form a joint authority composed of city governments. So this could essentially create more of a regional housing authority. Provides for the creation of a new municipal corporation as well. More past bills. An act, House Bill 1892, an act relating to workforce housing accelerator program This creates a workforce housing accelerator revolving loan program with the Department of Commerce in contract with the Washington State Finance Commission to administer loans to assist with development of low-income housing. Very key to a lot of communities throughout the state. House Bill 2003, an act relating to an exemption to the lease to excise tax of leases on public lands, creates an excise tax exemption when public land administered by the Department of Natural Resources are used for the placement of affordable housing. House Bill 2012, an act relating to eligibility for a property tax exemption for nonprofits providing affordable rental housing built with city and county funds, expands the qualifying funding sources for nonprofit exemptions. It does require a minimum of 75% occupancy by qualified residents. Now we're into bills that are currently in committee. House Bill 1473 is a proposed bill providing a tax system that is fair by enacting a narrowly tailored property tax on extreme wealth derived from the ownership, generally speaking, of stocks, bonds, and other financial property that is intangible. This establishes a 1% tax on items in excess of $250 million. The following bills are ones that died in session. House Bill 2270. To me, this was the most important one that I was a little disappointed did not go any further, perhaps maybe next year. This was an act proposing to create a Washington State Department of Housing. This would be a first of its kind throughout the state. Would have directed the Office of Financial Management to contract with external consultants and the transition to a new department. It's unclear if this new department would be or would have been under the Washington State Department of Commerce or another state agency, or perhaps independent. House Bill 2160, really a large bill in itself, a proposed act promoting community and transit-oriented housing developments, enhancement of density-friendly requirements near transit stops, limits on items such as off-street parking requirements, and SEPA review, which is quite interesting. House Bill 2114, another quite large one, a proposed act related to tenants subject to the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act by limiting rent and fee increases, notices, deposits, and establishing a landlord's resource center. What's key here is this would have limited rent increases to 7% during a 12-month period, increase the notice requirements, and parity between month-to-month and longer rental agreements. Once again, that did not pass. House Bill 2113, a proposed bill concerning housing element requirements in comprehensive plans. Requires GMA cities, once again, not the city of Pullman, requires GMA cities or counties to have the Washington Department of Commerce determine housing compliance. Cities are prohibited from denying an affordable housing development unless the housing element was okayed by Commerce. And lastly, House Bill 1245, proposed act related to increasing housing options via lot splitting. This would have required cities to allow for lot splitting if certain conditions were met. Tenant protections, meaning those that currently lived on a lot to be split, would have been in place to prevent displacement. Are there any questions from the City Council on these? I know it's a lot of information coming out of Olympia this year.
Councilmember Guido.
Thanks, RJ, for doing this every year. And it's always really helpful to see what, from a state level, what's being proposed, what's died, what's still in the works. And I think for the edification of the public, it's helpful to know what we're limited in doing when something like, for instance, a rent cap that's being proposed does not pass, because I know there is a desire within Pullman to do something like that. But to see the limits that we have imposed on us from the state, my my other question is not really, oh, I guess it is a question. You've presented a lot of these to us. How many of them are tied to being a GMA? Thank you.
Yes, great question. I'd say roughly half of them. However, that would be required of GMA cities. Pullman always has the option of
Right.
volunteering to participate,
Right.
but not required to.
And then a comment on the one related to manufactured homes. This is becoming a bigger issue, I'd say, in Pullman. It's definitely on my radar, hearing more and more about manufactured homes, trailer parks being sold, and much to the dismay of the people who are living in them, fees associated with their living quarters, their land, et cetera, that comes suddenly is raised to a point where they can't manage it and are looking at possibly being homeless. This is a huge thing that I think we need to be constantly looking at, and basically, we're not immune from this, and we need to be talking to our legislators about this.
And that is one that did pass for it. And I know at least one group of citizens in town that are currently utilizing this and working to try to purchase a court. Any other comments? If not, thank you very much. Appreciate it, RJ. Next up, we have the consent agenda. The items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by a single motion of City Council without separate discussion. With that, I entertain a motion to read the consent agenda by title only.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, with that, if you could read the consent agenda, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is a motion to dispense with the reading of the September 10, 2024 meeting minutes and approve them as submitted. Item 2 is a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks number 2011-2498 through 2011-2596, totaling $774,333.23. Item 3 is a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 2011-2597 through 2011-2658, totaling $1,324,628.56. Item 4, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks, electronic transfers, and ADP payroll, transfers totaling $1,682,758.38.
Do any council members desire to have any items removed from consent agenda to be discussed separately? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. We're next on to public hearing. With that, Jeff Albrecht is back up again for the public hearing for the 2025 revenue sources.
Thank you again. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about revenue sources as a prelude to the revenue hearing, really primarily related to property tax setting. We do a biennial budget, but the revenue hearing actually is an annual process that does need to go through as part of the budget and revenues and tax setting for the subsequent year. So first off, I'm going to kind of just walk you through a little bit of the revenue sources, and I have some historical numbers up there from 22 and 23, our 24 budget, as well as a 24 projected estimate, and this is still an estimate, obviously, as we're about not quite 3/4 the way through the year, and then where we're looking at preliminarily for the budget for 2025. And some of these numbers will change, obviously, as we go through the budget process and learn some more things. So 2023 is a very strong revenue year, really bounced back really well coming out of COVID. 2024 has seen a lot of those revenues kind of level off and even in a few cases dip a little bit. So 2024 revenue is probably going to most likely be a little bit lower than 23, but fortunately 23 was strong, which helped us out. 2025 is going to have pretty similar revenues with a few changes, including allowable tax increases. One thing we have noticed is construction has gotten kind of stagnant, which isn't a surprise during a high inflationary time. You see there the building permits is one that's low, and you'll see a little bit later that new construction as it relates to property taxes is definitely lower than historical numbers. We're probably in a little bit of a lull, I'm guessing, for a little while, and that's something that's definitely going to affect a lot of revenue sources in different ways. That was some of our other fund revenues. We have a streets fund, which is heavily grant and sourced by the utility tax. We do have a couple other taxes with real estate excise tax and fuel tax that contribute to the streets fund. The utilities fund is a proprietary fund. If you remember, proprietary funds are generally self-generating funds. They kind of cover their own costs for the most part. So almost all of the utility fund is charged for services. So charge for your water, sewer, stormwater, those types of things. And then our other main proprietary fund is a transit. That does receive some supplement from utility tax, but then again, we've done our grants, our transit manager has done a very good job of getting grants, which has been very helpful in having a positive revenue source for transit. And then we do have charges for services, and those are mostly contracts. There is some individual ridership that makes up that, but a lot of it is contracts for various services. A couple of our other smaller funds, the Civic Improvement Fund, which is the LTAC, which was brought up earlier, so that is tax on hotels. That had a very, very strong 23. 24 looks to be not quite as strong, but still pretty positive. We're kind of still waiting to see how that'll project out for 25. Firefighter pension, we do receive a small amount of allocation to help fund previous members of our firefighters' retirement plan. The 2018 bond is the bond. That number is set, so that bond tax is set. That never changes. It's the $1,043,000. We usually collect a little bit less because we have some people that don't pay their property tax, but we will collect that at a certain point. So we always budget for the full amount. Usually we collect a little bit less than that. And then cemetery expansion gets some money from cemetery sales, grave sales. So we're going to focus a lot on the general fund because that's really where the property taxes and most of the taxes lie. So the general fund is about 76% funded by some type of taxes. That's property taxes and sales tax are by far the bulk of that. There's utility taxes. There's a few other taxes on things like marijuana tax, liquor taxes, those types of things. But really the bulk of it is, by far the largest amount is the property tax, followed then by sales tax. We do charge for some goods and services. Primarily recreation is probably the biggest generator of that goods and services revenue. We do have some intergovernmental revenue from including grants. A large number of our grants fall in other funds, but we do have some grants that we receive in general funds. We also receive some funds from other government entities for various things. The miscellaneous category includes interest, surplus sales of surplus equipment, those types of things. And then our smallest revenues are licensing and permits and fines and forfeitures. So those are pretty small. I don't want to say insignificant because I don't think any revenue is important, but those are smaller amounts and that do help contribute to the revenue for the city. Here's a sales tax revenue graph. You notice it's through June. It's about almost a 3-month lag sometimes in sales tax. So businesses will collect their sales tax, for example, in September. They have until October 25th to remit it to the state, and the state remits it to us. So by the time it gets to us, it's somewhere between a 2 and a 3-month lag. So that's why the numbers you see are only through June. Again, you can see 2023 was a really, really strong year for us. That's the black line that's on top. Really saw significant increases over 21 and 22. 24 has been generally good, but you can see it has tailed off a little bit from 2023. That seems to be a fairly consistent trend. We had a really strong April. Some of the other months are a little less right now, so that's something we're continuing to monitor. There is certainly some timing impacts that can sometimes play into that a little bit. But we're potentially gonna see solid, but maybe not quite as strong as the 2023 for sales tax revenue. There will be a Metro Parks hearing too. I went ahead and included Metro Parks in this presentation, and we'll certainly reference it when we get to the revenue hearing there. Again, the Metro Parks District is technically a separate district, but it's the same boundaries as the city. And it does have a property tax that is for the sole funding of parks and parks projects. So really the main revenue there is property tax. We do receive some donations, so that's why you see there's a little bit of additional revenue. We don't budget for those donations because obviously we don't know if they're going to come in. And usually if they do come in, they're for a very specific purpose and get held set aside for that. So 2024, we had some donations to Veterans Memorial Park. That'll sit there and be used eventually for that park project. So. Here's a graph of the City of Pullman assessed value. This is a combination of new construction, which will increase assessed value, as well as new assessments on property. So you see, obviously, I think as most people are aware, it did jump up in '24 as they did do new assessments. A lot of the increases for the previous years had been related to new construction more than assessment changes, although there is always a combination of those that do happen. So. It is important to know that when we have an increase in assessed value, that doesn't necessarily mean property taxes increase at the same level. And in fact, most, not all, but most property taxes increase at a lower percentage than the assessed value, but it does vary a little bit depending on what type of tax it is. This is a graph of the implicit price deflator versus the growth in the property tax. Really what the IPD is it's another term basically for inflation. There's all sorts of different inflation measures out there, but that's really what the IPD is. The reason it relates directly to property taxes by law in Washington can only go up by 1% or the IPD, whichever is lower. In most cases, the IPD is over 1%. You see a few years there where it wasn't. But what's really worth noting on this graph is what's really happened in the last 3 to 4 years. We had been kind of creeping along somewhere in that probably 1.5% to 3.5%. Property tax assessment on existing property can only go up 1%. So you can see how that gap has kind of created over the years. But then in the last few years where you saw 3.8, 6.4, 3.6, and projected to be about a 2.6 this year, that's really created a large increase in expenses without necessarily the offsetting increase in revenue, at least when it relates to property tax. So that's really been something that is starting to flatten out. Right now it's projected for 2025. We'll get the actual number here soon, but it's projected to be around 2.6. So that is starting to level out, but it really has created a large gap between the property tax revenue and the cost of doing business. So here's just a little bit of information on property tax. So the dollar bill there just kind of shows where a City of Pullman's resident, where their property tax goes. So Porter Whitman School District, the hospital district, the state of the Washington, Whitman County, and the City of Pullman. So that kind of shows you where, what percentages and where your money goes. It is worth noting that in 2023, the assessed for all the taxes combined was about 14.83 cents per thousand. That actually went down to under $14 in 2024. So what that means is as the property valuation went up, the tax per thousand went down. Now, your property taxes still went up, but it's again an example of proportionally it probably didn't go up as much as you did. So you saw that there's actually an 84-cent reduction per thousand. But depending on what your property tax went up, there's a reasonable chance your taxes may have still gone up just at a much lower rate. The chart up in the upper left kind of shows the city. We have a city regular, EMS levy, the bond, again, which is set in the Metro Parks. So you can see all those combined. In 2023, we're about $4.48 per thousand. In 2024, we're just a little bit over $4. So that went down by about 46 cents. So about half of that reduction that you saw per thousand in property taxes was related to city taxes. Again, some taxes, like the bonds, stay flat no matter what. Some will only go up by, the 1%, and some do go up. None of the city ones, but some of the other ones do go up based off of the true valuation, so. And there you take a look at this kind of the pie chart showing where the locations are for the city taxes. So going forward, what we're looking at for property tax, you can see the levy rates there on the far left. The proposed increase is what we're allowed to do. So it's the 1% increase. City of Metro Parks limited to the 1% increase. EMS is limited to 50 cents per thousand. So that shows those increases that are allowed, shows the new total. The estimated new construction, it is still an estimate at this point. We'll probably get some updated numbers on that in October, so that'll probably change slightly. I don't think it's going to change significantly. It is worth noting that that is quite a bit less than historical. Right now, that new construction number is about 8.5 million. We'll probably go up a little bit. It's quite often closer into the 30 to 40 million range. And again, this is new construction on taxable property. So if WC builds something, if the school district, the hospital, a church builds something, that's not a new taxable revenue. So a lot of this is driven by home or by apartments, those types of things, which that construction really has dipped lately. So a lot of times the estimated new construction revenue will actually be as much as the proposed increase. That almost certainly won't be the case this year, so we won't see near as much revenue from new construction as we have seen in many years. Again, the 2.6 IPD, as long as it's over 1, you're allowed to do that 1% increase. We'll find out the exact number soon. I can't imagine it's going to drop much off of that 2.6, so it should stay above the 1. So what are the next steps from here? There's a public hearing for both the city and the Metro Parks. We'll need to do a public hearing on those revenue sources, primarily to receive input regarding the property tax piece. On November 12th, we'll bring a resolution to the council. On that evening, we would ask you to set the property tax levies for the regular levy, the EMS levy, and the Metro Parks levy. Again, the bond levy set, that one doesn't change. We would ask you to set those. By state statute, it has to be filed by November 30th. Whitman County has asked us to file by November 15th, just so they have a little leeway. So based off the results of that meeting, we would then take that and file that with the county by November 15th to meet the requirements for doing taxes for 2025. Any questions on that?
With that, any questions? Okay, with that, we move into the public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to provide any comments as a part of the public hearing related to the 2025 revenue sources? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Since we have also had the Metropolitan Parks and then also the transportation, at this time I will adjourn the City Council in order to open the Metropolitan Parks District meeting. And with that, Dee, would you please call roll?
President Benjamin.
Present.
Commissioner DeLira.
Here.
Commissioner Fajarin.
Here.
Commissioner Gaither.
Here.
Commissioner Guido. Here. Commissioner Parks.
Here.
Commissioner Weller.
Present.
Commissioner Wright.
Here.
At this time, we have community comments for final action related to the Metropolitan Park District. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment on either of the two regular item agendas? Seeing none, we'll move into regular agenda. The first is a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes with the Metropolitan Parks District special meeting of March 26, 2024. An improvement is submitted. With that, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion?
Here.
Councilmember DeLira?
Yeah, so I would like to make a request, I would like to request an edit to the meeting minutes.
This is the Metropolitan Parks of March 26th.
Oh, no.
I think you want to do the transportation one. Okay, so any other? If not, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They pass. So the next item is a public hearing for the 2025 revenue sources related to the Metropolitan Parks. Jeff, do you want to put up that slide specifically to those revenue sources? He included.
Yeah, so just real quick, again, Metro Parks is that property tax revenue, so you can see there, and what we're looking at is that 1% increase plus new construction as far as the property tax revenue.
Okay. And that, first of all, any questions from the council related to this? Seeing none, then I'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment related to the 2025 revenue sources of the Metropolitan Parks District? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and adjourn the Metropolitan Parks District meeting. And I will now call to order, the Transportation Benefit District meeting. And with that, Dee, if you could please call roll.
President Benjamin.
Present.
Commissioner Delira.
Here.
Commissioner Fajarin.
Here.
Commissioner Gaither.
Here.
Commissioner Guido.
Here.
Commissioner Parks.
Here.
Commissioner Weller.
Present.
Commissioner Wright.
Here.
First item is community comments on any final action items to be taken during this agenda. Are there any community members who would like to provide comment? With that, please come forward, and once you're done, please make sure you do sign in so we get your name right.
Can I
Thank you.
please request 3 minutes for this, or 2.5 minutes will suffice?
For council, so 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Benjamin and council members. As many of you know, my name is Jamie Brush, and for the past decade, I've worked closely with local officials, city departments, transportation planners, engineers, the Pullman School District, and community organizations to advocate for safer streets and accessible infrastructure. Tonight, I would like to build upon my comments that I provided at the August 27th special meeting regarding the Transportation Benefit District proposal and tax increase. After analyzing the proposal in detail, I have identified key opportunities to ensure it aligns more closely with our city's Complete Streets policy. My work, particularly through the nonprofit Synergy Bicycle Alliance that I founded and lead, has resulted in tangible improvements, such as the permanent installation of the annual tactical urbanism project I created that we now recognize as the Crestview Path, reflecting the city's growing commitment to multimodal transportation. At the August 27th meeting, I expressed conditional support for the proposed TBD tax increase. However, I want to clarify that my comments were intended to highlight both the potential of the TBD and my concerns about its alignment with Pullman's Complete Streets policy. Since 2014, I have advocated for this funding mechanism to enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety. Our adopted Complete Streets policy emphasizes the need for safe, efficient, reliable, and equitable access for all users. However, several inconsistencies exist between the proposed TBD and this policy, which I have detailed in a document I've emailed to the council. To address these inconsistencies, I strongly recommend creating an official multimodal advisory board, a diverse group of stakeholders who would guide the selection of transportation projects, ensuring that the needs of pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users are prioritized. Additionally, I propose 7 specific revisions to ensure the TBD supports multimodal connectivity, clearly defines transportation improvements, and includes performance measures to hold projects accountable. My hope is that by embracing these revisions, we can develop a TBD that serves all Pullman residents, pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, and drivers alike, and builds a safer, more inclusive transportation system. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to provide public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public comments. First item of the regular agenda is a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the Transportation Benefit District special meeting of August 27, 2024, and approve them as submitted. I do entertain a motion for approval.
So move. Second.
With that, any discussion on the minutes? Councilmember Delira?
So I would like to make a request for an edit to the meeting minutes to address Jamie Brush's concerns about the reporting of her statement on August 27th. I agree that it does miss a lot of nuance, and upon listening to her public meeting comment on the live stream for that day, I agree that she didn't explicitly mention support, rather more conditional support for the tax increase, and also gave constructive but critical thoughts around community engagement process for multimodal transportation needs and feedback around the TBD. So I request for support to change what's on record in the current meeting minutes to something like, yes. So I would like the leading statement for this change to read something like, Jamie Brush, founder of Synergy Bicycle Alliance, made the following statement during public comment in conditional support of the tax increase. And then following this leading statement, she read out loud and also re-delivered her statement in her September 19th email to also include. I would like what she sent to us, which is her written statement that she read out loud exactly, to be also included in the meeting minutes following the leading statement.
So Thad, does this need to be specifically read in, or?
Can we provide a copy?
I'm asking for a clarification for this because there's a lot of, it's not specific.
So I would like to clarify that minutes are designed to take the action of the council. It doesn't take verbatim what somebody says. We take action minutes. So means that Jamie sent you the email with her comments. That's for your information, but that does not need to be reflected exactly in the minutes.
So let's, first of all, do I have a second, just so we can start the, is there a second to this motion to amend the minutes? Well, I need a second in order for us to have the conversation.
Considering the request came from the person who made that comment, I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a second. So with that, Thad? If you,
With what Dee said, it really is the minutes, the intent of the minutes is to identify the action taken by the council. It is not to document all the public comments that were made. And so I don't know if I would recommend the council setting itself up to have a verbatim recitation of all of the public comments that were made during the council meeting. That's a big change to what's being done, and it's beyond what's required. And you may need to get someone to, I guess, draft out the dictation from the meeting if the council wants to go to that extreme on their minutes.
so hearing that, I think the crux of this, I think, is around support as opposed to conditional support. So, Councilmember DeLira?
Yeah, I guess some further comments is maybe in the future we could consider having more verbatim statements for the sake of transparency, but I think for now, for the sake of what we have going on right now, I would maybe at least push for a statement that says Jamie Brush, founder of Synergy Bicycle Alliance, made a statement in conditional support of the tax increase and perhaps what was originally there.
So we have one motion that's on the table right now. that first
She
of all,
just reworded it, I think. Yeah. That-
so I'm trying, Dad, is it best for us to vote this down and then accept a different one, or is,
I think there needs to be a vote on the motion that's been
so we first of all.
made and seconded, and
So we
then,
have a vote on the first motion that was made and seconded. Is there any other discussion related to that motion?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Parks?
I would just like to say, and no disrespect to Jamie or anyone who makes a public comment, the purpose of meeting minutes is to summarize what was said. And so even all of our comments are not verbatim or all the way out. And secondly, your comments were captured on the recording of the meeting. Everybody's always are. And so we do have it available for people to reference. But really, in any board I've been on, minutes are simply sort of a summarization of what happened. The only real specific thing, as Dee said, is the actual action that was taken by said board, if that makes sense. And just to help clarify.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the first motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Sorry, nay, sorry.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, so it fails. Is there any other motions? So Councilmember Delira?
Yeah, I would like to propose maybe a more succinct summary instead. So perhaps something like Jamie Brush, founder of Synergy Bicycle Alliance, was in conditional support of the tax increase and provided constructive but critical thoughts around community engagement process for multimodal transportation needs and feedback around the TBD.
So I would need this in writing. In order for everyone, so council,
So what is written in the minutes currently states Jamie Brush, founder of Synergy Bicycle Alliance, supports the Transportation Benefit District. However, Ms. Brush stated that the TBD is just not about roads, but about creating a safer, more accessible city for everyone, regardless of how they travel, and it must align with the city's complete streets policy.
so there is a motion on the table. Is there a second? Let's start there. I'm not seeing,
I'll second, since this request came from the person who made the
so there's this
comment.
So there's a second, so discussion. And Councilmember Fajarin?
I feel we can just make this correction without setting any type of precedent for how minutes are carried out for future use. So I would support this motion.
Any other discussion?
I didn't
Councilman-
hear, I'm sorry, I just didn't hear Thad describe it in that way. I don't know if that's exactly what we can actually do, given that Thad said that it would have to, it could potentially set a precedent.
Dad?
I think it could set a precedent. And maybe create a burden for staff and the council that goes beyond what is required for the minutes of a city council meeting. Because again, it is just a summary of what occurred. The video is available on YouTube. And so it could get to a point where the city's needs to get somebody to sit and watch the video and transcribe it, if that's really the intent here. And I think that's the path it could take.
Okay. Additional discussion, Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. I was looking through the minutes. Do we refer back to the video? Is there some way we can just say for further information, refer to the video? or something along those lines, because I understand it's creating a precedent, and I also understand, I know when I first started, I would look through a lot of these and say to myself, now wait, where are my comments? And that was when they were very, very big, long. Is there any way to just say for, succinct or whatever, for additional information, refer to the video?
If I may step in at this point, is there a way, I think what you're asking to, is there a way when we publish a set of minutes for approval that maybe we can put a link to the YouTube video on that last line?
That would be pretty nifty.
And providing that YouTube link stays that way forever.
Yeah, that'd be kind of tough. Yeah.
I could see where that might stray from time to time, but it's been fairly reliable so far for the most part until we come up with a better idea. How do we feel about something like that?
I'm a little reluctant because it may change. And you can get there from the city's website.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we need to include it in the official record of the city council meeting or the Transportation Benefit District meeting.
Yeah.
So I think that information is widely available.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is the right place to do it.
Just real quick, just quick on it. Is there any way to, for instance, create an asterisk and just say, hey, not hey, but, please refer to minutes from X date for further information?
I guess that's an issue for council and staff.
Okay.
There is.
Maybe I'm just overcomplicating, but I'm
I
trying to
think
find a middle way.
When you link on the agenda in board docs, there's a link to the meeting on YouTube. So.
I just also want to say, Dee, thank you so much for all of the work you do into the minutes. I think it's not something we recognize. So I appreciate what you're doing. So.
And Councilmember Delera?
Yeah, so I'm reopening the minutes just more recently. It looks like the document itself changed since Thursday when it was first posted. Gotcha. Okay, so
So you don't have any other discussion? No. Okay. So if there's no other discussion, Dee, have you captured accurately the requested motion? Do you have the motion, Councilmember Delera?
so I think this motion is on the more shorter version that I stated. So that was not the verbatim statement that she said during that meeting. Correct? So we rejected that first one.
We reject the first one. You then gave a second one.
Yes.
Do you have that written down?
I could send it over, yes. And
Well, if we're going to vote on it, I want it read.
Okay, I can read it again a second time, which I did already read it once. Okay, so, sorry, let me just put it open. So I would like it to say, Jamie Brush, founder of Synergy Bicycle Alliance, stated conditional support of the tax increase and provided constructive but critical thoughts around community engagement process for multimodal transportation needs and feedback around the Transportation Benefit District.
Okay, that's the motion that's before us. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by nay.
Nay.
Okay, it fails. So we're back to the original motion. Are there any additional discussion related to the minutes of the Transportation Benefit District? If not, those in favor of passing, of approving as submitted the minutes from the Transportation District special meeting of August 27, 2024, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is an ordinance authorizing the increase of Pullman sales tax and use tax by 0.1% for transportation improvement projects. And with that, Mike Urban.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council and board. Before you for your consideration tonight is ordinance TBD-02-24, imposing an additional sales and use tax of 0.1% within the boundaries of the Pullman Transportation Benefit District for the purpose of financing costs associated with transportation improvements in the district. So on August 27th, the Transportation Benefit District held an open public hearing, consider increasing this sales tax by 0.1%. This tax would begin being collected on January 1st, 2025. After the public hearing, the board consideration and deliberation, a request was made to staff to bring forward an ordinance for potential action. This ordinance is included for your consideration. And to begin collecting the sales tax on January 1st, 2025, the Transportation Benefit District must first approve it and then provide notice to the Washington State Department of Revenue no later than October 18th, 2024, and that's per RCW. So just to be clear, this is a 0.1% sales tax. This is not the additional 0.2% sales tax. That increase is available for the Transportation Benefit District, but it must be approved by a majority of the voters of the district, and that activity is not being proposed at this time. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the ordinance.
Are there any questions for Mike Urban? Councilmember Weller?
So I know Jamie had brought up some interesting points regarding, good points regarding the Complete Streets program and then the intersection with the TBD. Is there a reason why there's not reference to the Complete Streets in our TBD?
Yeah, I'm going to try to answer that, and if I don't hit what, Jamie and I haven't talked specifically about it, so if I missed your point, I apologize, and we'll chat some more and redirect it. Seems to me that the Complete Streets, as we've adopted it through the city, separate of the Transportation Benefit District, is very specific, talks a lot about multimodal and all these other pieces that go along with that. Where the Transportation Benefit District has been brought and accepted in the widest possible version. So it seems, I guess for the best way that I understand it, is the Transportation Benefit District, this big, wider funnel that the Complete Streets would certainly fit within, and that's how we plan our projects through the city, where the Transportation Benefit District is the funding to put into some of these projects. But that's a very broad view, and I don't want to speak for Ms. Brush on some of her specific concerns, but am I kind of hitting on your thought a little bit there? Okay, I need to reread the email, and I'm sorry I was not prepared for that piece, so I'm going to have to get back to you on it.
Okay. And then, sorry, can I have an
Go ahead,
additional?
one more.
Okay. And then is there a review? I know Jamie had mentioned review process, suggested a review process to make sure that the TBD is following, being effective and so on and so forth. Is this something that you feel would be good, especially being a numbers guy?
So when it comes to the projects that are being designed for the Transportation Benefit District, it's a lot like Metro Parks where they're going to piggyback a lot of the city's items. So using the complete streets and those types of items will continue to be looked at. I also know one of council's goals is to analyze all the boards and commissions we already have and look at ones that we may not have. So we were going to fold that into that piece of that, but it certainly, if you want to make that a requirement of creating this board to pass the 1/10 of 1%, that's within the board's purview. It's going to be going through a bunch of different projects, will be going through different iterations and different sets of eyes also at this point, but we haven't set up a specific process for this in that, you know, the benefit district took a while to get to where it was, and it was designed to be very broad to be able to handle anything that could be transportation related, whether it's a path, a bus, or a road.
Okay.
Yeah, and currently, right now, there is a review process related to our transportation improvement plan that goes, I mean, there's a review process that goes through, that even goes through council already related to that. So that review process happens before any project would end up on being used for this money.
Okay, and just real quick, in reference, since you haven't had a chance to look at Jamie's email, and I respect very much her expertise, especially on this. Is there any way, I know we need to move forward with the date, because the date is coming up, this October.
We need to notify Department of Revenue no later than October 18th, and I got to tell you, I haven't looked to see what day of the week that is, so if it falls on a Sunday, it'll probably be a Friday, that type of a thing. So now that's in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see how we can find a way to be able to address the concerns, the suggestions, and move forward to be able to notify. So,
perhaps I'd suggest a future agenda item then for the Transportation Benefit District for that amount.
okay, I'm going to be quiet, let other council members speak.
So
Sorry.
related to
Councilmember Park,
this,
I mean-
oh, thank you, sorry. This resolution, to my understanding, is just the funding mechanism for this, and my understanding is also there isn't a transportation benefit district until it is funded. And so these policy decision, or, you know, the decisions within it, as far as the implementation of it, I do think is important. I'm not certain, however, if that's what we're talking about right here. I don't think our approving the funding negates future input about how it's structured and how it operates. Is that incorrect? Okay.
That's correct.
So I just wanted to kind of refocus that right now, we're just talking about funding it, which would then actually create it. Right now, it's there, there's a shell there, but until we get the funding, then we can start having, taking action on the actual content. Does that make sense?
Other discussions?
I'd like to take that a step further too. We just had public hearing for revenue sources in those pieces, and because the Transportation Benefit District doesn't, it was not included in the discussion.
Councilmember DeLira?
Yeah, and then in the future, we can always, again, explore the multimodal advisory group. And I think we should definitely have that as an agenda item in the next Transportation Benefit District meeting. But we definitely still have to fund the projects that are on the TIP that are very important. So, yeah.
Other discussion? So Councilmember Weller again?
Yeah, I would support that as we push forward, being able to massage out the details. The multimodal is definitely important. You know, discussing some of these other things, the review process and so on and so forth. But got to move forward before we can start, you know, kneading the dough. So got to put it on the table. So.
Yeah, this is specific funding related. Any other discussion?
I would just like to say one more thing. A lot of people, I've been hearing a little bit of grumbling about increasing a tax. Two things about this. If you think about this as like a piggy bank for transportation projects, which can be roads, paths, buses, pedestrian access, and things like that. So out of every sales tax dollar, 0.1% will go into this piggy bank, so that as it builds, we will have funding, just like with our Parks District, we will have access to set-aside funding that will be there, and that's particularly important in the case of emergencies or things like that. I also like that it's really equitable. We're not just charging our residents, we're charging anyone who comes into the city and purchases something. So it could be a farmer hauling ag products and they stop and buy a beverage or some gasoline. It can be all the people who are here on the weekends buying things in the grocery stores and in our shops downtown. So I like that it kind of brings in many more of the users than just the people who reside here.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Weller?
I know, Fran. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to piggyback. I really appreciated what Ann was saying because, nobody likes to pay the taxes until they realize that, they're bottoming out their car, and those taxes could have gone to help that. I think also it's important to recognize, and I personally do appreciate Jamie for being here. She's gone through a lot of this information and has brought a lot of expertise, so I wanted to appreciate your comments. So that was it.
Seeing none others, all those in, with that, Thad, if you could read the agenda item?
I don't think we made a motion yet. Do we?
No, there's not.
I move to adopt ordinance number, TBD 0224.
Second.
That's right. We had the presentation, discussion on the presentation. Now it's on to the ordinance. So with that, any discussion related to the ordinance? With that, Thad, if you could read the ordinance, please.
Ordinance number TBD-02-24, an ordinance of the Pullman Transportation Benefit District imposing an additional sales and use tax of 0.1% within the boundaries of the Pullman Transportation Benefit District for the purpose of financing the costs associated with transportation improvements in the district identified herein as authorized by RCW 36.73.040, providing for severability and establishing an effective date.
With that, any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. With
Thank you,
that,
council.
With that, I will adjourn the Transportation Benefit District special meeting and reopen the regular city council meeting. Our next agenda item, a regular agenda, is a resolution adopting a fee schedule for land leases. With that, RJ Lott.
Thank you again, Mayor, and good evening, council. This item on your agenda for this evening is a resolution adopting a fee schedule for land leases effective October 15th, 2024. So as the project downtown Pullman nears completion, city staff will begin accepting land lease applications beginning October 1st. Staff's currently working with the city attorney on creating a new application that will help streamline the process once we begin opening the opportunity to accept those. Any new land leases would be approved by the city council and would utilize the new fee schedule after October 15th. Due to contract restrictions and liability issues, any new land leases on Main Street cannot be effective before project downtown Pullman is completed in full. Fees for future land leases and renewals may be changed by resolution of the city council. So the current calculation for land leases is a bit clumsy and confusing. It currently is calculated by taking the requested square feet of the land lease multiplied by 50%, multiplied by the current consumer price index, known as the CPI, divided by the CPI of June 24th, which is hard to explain and hard to calculate. The proposed resolution for the fee schedule simplifies and streamlines the fee to $250 for the first year and $200 for each subsequent year the lease is in place. $200 a year is approximately 55 cents a day. This fee is intended for sidewalk cafes or sidewalk seating, not to exceed 250 square feet in size. To note, there is a state law that requires annual leases of more than $250 that a excise tax would need to be paid. So this proposed fee schedule is under that threshold. By comparison, the city of Spokane requires $300 for initial review of a land lease with $250 annually thereafter. Staff recommends the adoption of the proposed fee schedule for land leases as presented. Are there any questions I can answer?
Could you, first of all, start, there were a number of questions that came up in public comment. Could you speak to those?
Remind me of what the questions were.
First one had to do with the land lease has not to exceed 250 square feet. Can you do multiple leases? So could a single property owner have more than one lease?
Yes, you could have more than one lease by a property owner. This resolution is only for the fee schedule, not for the approval or review of city council land leases.
We then had one that asked, and I think this is related to the multiplier, is could they go smaller with reduced price?
That would be up to the discretion of the city council by approval of a resolution creating the fee schedule.
Okay. There was a question related to price compared to Moscow's fee schedule.
I do not know what Moscow charges. Did not review cities outside the state of Washington.
There was a question then on who can do the land lease. Does it need to be the adjacent property owner, or could it be just anybody?
Historically, it's been the adjacent property owner, but technically, anybody could apply for a land lease. It would still need to go through the city council for approval. And I would think that the council would take that under consideration, who the adjacent landowner is when approving a land lease.
Okay. There was a question related to, is it possible to have a waiver for the first year?
I would defer to the city attorney on that question.
I think that would violate the Washington Constitution prohibition of gift of public funds.
And then the last one that I had, and I might have missed as I was trying to, was would use of the DPA tables and chairs, and I'm not sure, it wasn't clear whether it was tables and chairs where they're currently located or moving them to their location. Would that affect the opportunity for a land lease or the price of a land lease?
That is a good question. I don't know if the DPA has a land lease where they intend to put the tables and chairs. They may need to apply for one. I don't know if I could answer that. That would be up to the discretion of the council to approve that type of land lease if the DPA came forward with one.
Yeah. The current DPAs where they currently have the lease that's in the Pine Street is not a permanent land lease, but anybody can rent the space, and the DPA has to move those tables and chairs off so many days ahead of time. So it's not a land lease in that context. So with that, Councilmember Parks.
Yeah, may I please just add to that? So the purpose, the intent of the DPA furniture is, so I was just in an all-day meeting with DPA, and it's referred to as movable downtown table and chairs or movable, so they're not actually designed or meant to be permanent installations, is my understanding, so that they can be moved around. Yes, they do need to clear out when, like in the public plazas and things like that, but people have the ability to move them around in the downtown to a certain extent, is my understanding. That was the intent of them, to not have them be permanently placed.
Okay. Other, Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we need to have a land lease in front of these businesses?
I defer to the city attorney on that one as well.
So are you asking, in order for a commercial business to use the city sidewalk for commercial purposes, do they need a lease?
I know, crazy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
There needs to be some type of an agreement, because that is public property that is being used to the exclusion of others for a commercial purpose that does not benefit the city. So yes, there needs to be some type of an agreement. And that's why waiving the fee would be a gift of public funds, because you are giving exclusive use to city property to a single private business.
Even if it's across the board, all businesses?
Yes, because you're only benefiting the businesses. There's a whole population in Pullman that doesn't have a business downtown. And it's just like if you gave every farmer the opportunity to use Pullman property for free, and you didn't distinguish between farmers, it would still be a gift of public funds, because it's not benefiting the entire community. It's benefiting individuals.
So we're rocking a hard place with the legal. I mean, we don't really have much wiggle room there, right? Sounds like.
That's my interpretation, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I found one more question that I hadn't gotten. Another one. There was one statement where they talked about that they currently had a $10 lease and that the price was going up. And so did we previously have a land lease that was a $10 land lease?
We may very well have. There was a letter sent in February of '24 to all property owners along Main Street that terminated those leases. And it stated that any new lease would need to come before the city council. So there may be a land lease of $10. I did not go through each lease to determine what those fees were. However, that letter stated that any new land lease would need to be reapproved by the city council.
Okay. Councilmember Fajarin?
Thank you, and thank you, RJ, for putting this document together as we transition to the land leases. I know a lot of business owners are excited and ready to start using those beautiful new sidewalks that we have. Mainly, my question is kind of for my fellow council members and possibly staff, but I realize that a waiver might not be appropriate, as it was said, a gift of public funds, but would council be willing to lower the application fee to say, maybe, I'm just throwing a number out, $50, $25, then maybe reevaluate that during the next budget cycle, just as kind of an introductory process for these first 2 years?
Right now, it's questions here. We haven't actually brought it in. That's proper for when we actually get debating on. Councilmember Delera, so questions for RJ?
Yeah, so I know I asked this question over email, and I think it's good for public knowledge, but how much would a 250 square feet area be in the current land lease fee system?
Yes, great question, and thank you for asking that ahead of time so I could calculate it. The approximate calculation for 250 square feet using the current fee formula would come out to about $155 a year.
Councilmember Parks?
Another question that I've been asked, and I believe it was asked tonight, was, is this fee only for sidewalk cafes and sidewalk, I lost the wording, for seating? Thank you. So if somebody has racks of clothing out or tables of merchandise, does that apply to that as well, or only if they would be sort of permanent installations?
That's a good question. In my perspective, if there was a retail establishment on Main and they wanted to bring out a rack of clothing for a Saturday sale, sidewalk sale, that would not be the intent of a sidewalk lease. A sidewalk lease, at least from my perspective, is a semi-permanent seating with tables and chairs, perhaps umbrellas or flowers or something to make it more comfortable for patrons, that would be on the sidewalk essentially year-round or almost year-round. So this would not be a lease for a one-time sale where you could wheel out or place clothing items and then at the end of the business day bring those back in.
Thank you. And a follow-up, would this apply to the benches that will be placed throughout the downtown? No, because those are coming from the city or GPA, correct? Okay. I need to think that out loud. Thank you.
I'm trying to get others that haven't. Councilmember Wright?
Thank you,
And
RJ. So I just have a couple of questions. One is just to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. If the business owner needs more than 250 feet, they have the option of submitting several applications for however much space they need with their adjacent property. Is that correct?
That is one avenue to complete that, or they could utilize the current fee formula if the council desires for land leases exceeding 250 square feet. So there's two options there.
Okay, but then with that, does that then kick in the excise tax piece? If it goes beyond that?
I'm not an excise tax expert, but it's my understanding that those are for the individual leases, not the collective lease.
Okay, okay.
But please don't take that as expert advice.
Yeah, no, I understand. But I just want to make sure that we're able to accommodate at least the restaurateurs that are looking forward to being able to have the sidewalk cafes and sidewalk seating, that they're not precluded from being able to do that because they're restricted to a 250-foot.
The intent's not to restrict, it's merely to set a fee schedule.
Okay.
There's no implied restriction at 250 square feet.
Okay, okay, and so then we came up with the $250, just kind of looking at other communities in the state and what their different fee structures were.
Yes.
So we have, there's no set formula for determining this amount of money. So we just, I'm using the term arbitrary just because that seems to be the most appropriate. But there's nothing that says we can't adjust this particular fee schedule.
Absolutely. So the council can adjust fees by resolution at any time.
Okay.
Whether it's for land leases or for any other application that staff routinely processes.
Okay. And then my last question has to do with the effective date of this. Given that we're coming out of this downtown project and, you know, any cost at this point to some of our business owners is going to be somewhat onerous, in lieu of waiving the fee, can we delay the effective date of it without that then being called a gift of city funds?
The effective date would be tied to whenever the business applies for the land lease. So for instance, if they didn't intend to have outdoor seating until the spring of '25, they could apply in January, February, and then not have that lease be active until hypothetically April 1st. Does that answer your
Okay.
question?
I think so, but then it generates another question, and that is, can you activate and deactivate that land lease? So let's say November, you're done, you go from, let's say, May to November, you're done. Can you withdraw from the land lease and reactivate it the following spring or whenever the time frame would be?
Yeah, in the lease itself, there are clauses for ending leases, either by the business owner or by the city. So whatever that lease is that is agreed upon, that would be the clause for ending a land lease.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're offering our business owners every opportunity to get going again after the project is done without, again, all of the rules and regulations being so onerous that it's difficult to do business in those
I understand that.
conditions.
Really, the intent of this is to simplify the process in which previous calculations were difficult and challenging to explain. So this is really just a process to simplify.
Okay. Thank you, RJ, and I appreciate the work you've done on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike?
Okay, I'm sorry I have to step in and back off one of RJ's comments a little bit. Although the council does have the ability to set these rates on these types of things, at the end of the day, too, we also have to justify the rate that was set to the state auditor's office as to how we arrived at fair market value, quote unquote, fair market value. And there's different ways that can be done and do that. So when taking these things into account, throwing arbitrary numbers out there without also looking at these other additional steps could possibly expose us down the road if ever audited on those things. And they do look at those from time to time.
So a clarification on a statement that you made earlier for Pat, when you were saying if a larger lease could either purchase a second or do the number, currently the proposed resolution does not allow for increasing the size beyond 250 square feet. Is that correct? It would require council amendment to this resolution to allow for someone to be able to do 300 square feet without it being two separate things.
Absolutely. So the council has the discretion to change the resolution, to amend the resolution. If the council finds that 300 square feet is more appropriate to match this fee schedule, then they can adopt that.
Thank you. Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was trying to look through City of Walla Walla for their, I can't find it. You're referencing Spokane, and I appreciate what Mike was saying. Has to be defensible. And that I appreciate you answering what I was saying, because I was trying to get to the point, even though it sounded crazy, that we can't just give it away. So really rock in a hard place. So have you looked at Walla Walla, because I see that as a more apt comparable than Spokane?
Yes, I looked at a number of cities, trying to focus really on the east side of the state to make sure that it was an apples-to-apples comparison. And the calculation of fees varied wildly. Pasco uses an inspection fee. They also have a right-of-way permit. And it's very difficult to even explain to me over the phone what a standard lease rate may be. So when I put in here the comparison to the city of Spokane, just as a flat fee, that's the easiest way, at least in my perspective, for staff to communicate to business owners of what that fee could be in the simplest way possible.
Okay, so what I'm getting is that even though Walla Walla is more like our size comparison, it's more simple to go with Spokane than it would be to go with somebody like, our size. Is that correct?
Just based on the flat fee formula. That's what I was going after, not the size of the city. just the easiest way to communicate to those applying what the fee would be.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how to properly, I don't know, explain it, because people are going to say, I mean, why Spokane? And in my opinion, if I was a business owner downtown, I'd be like, well, Spokane is huge in comparison. And in answer, even though I understand what you're saying of it's a simplified version, I don't think it's going to fly with a lot of businesses. So just, I understand what you're saying. I don't know how to explain it more, so that people can understand that it's a simplified version versus a comparable version. So I think it's going to happen quite a bit once we go down this road. So I'm just mentioning that. And one last thing, also our winters do cut that time down for using that outside space. I know there's, places that put out heaters and so on and so forth. So while when I first looked at it, I'm like, oh, this is kind of a deal. I'm also not a business owner downtown, and they are working against the fact that, you can sit outside, nice weather for 5 months, maybe, somewhere around there. So I think that's also for us to think about, so.
Councilmember Wright?
I almost forgot what my question was going to be. So I'm going to do it, well, first of all, and I haven't fully read the resolution, but we could, as a council, agree to have the lessor identify what their square footage needs are in their application, and then apply the fee appropriately depending on whatever the formula is that we come up with. Is that something that's feasible?
Yes, absolutely. So past land leases, the applicant would create essentially a plot plan showing the dimensions of the property that they would want to lease. That would ensure that, one, the council knows the total square footage, they would know where the location is, would also allow staff to analyze that the horizontal clearance of the sidewalk would meet ADA standards. There are standards for horizontal clearance. So that has traditionally been in the land lease itself, the plot plan showing, including dimensions of what the property owner would want to lease.
Okay.
And that would not change.
Okay, thank you. The second question that I have is just kind of a reversal. So obviously, we have a number of businesses downtown that are not going to be in this sidewalk cafes or eatery type situation. So in that case, the adjacent land in front of those businesses, that's city, correct? I mean, that would be city land. That correct?
Can you ask the question again?
Okay. Those businesses that are not a business that would be applying for a land lease, and I'll primarily identify the sidewalk cafes, the sidewalk eateries. They're just a walk-in retail operation or a professional service operation. Okay, so the land adjacent to those businesses, whose responsibility is it to ensure the safety of that property, i.e. snow removal, for one thing? Does that fall to the city? So the adjacent property owner is not responsible for that? How, in this land lease situation, how does that work when we don't have a lease in place?
Yes, there is wording in the lease that addresses that, and it would be the responsibility of the adjacent property owner.
But if they're not a lessor,
Right.
whose responsibility is it?
Still the adjacent property owner. It'd be no different as if it was a residential use.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember
Yeah, going back to other comparing ourselves with other cities, and some people do compare to us with cities like Walla Walla and Pasco, and I wonder if it would be possible to have this information brought back to us if council decides to table this agenda item with adjustments to this resolution? If we had.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So any other questions to RJ? Mike?
Just a comment to Councilmember Delira. Tabling it is absolutely within the purview of the council. The next meeting is October 8th, and that would, based on the actions of the council at that time, we'd be able to start putting out the ground lease piece after that.
So for us not to take action tonight, we'll delay the availability of, we'll delay the October 1st date because the application can't be done until the fee schedule is set. So any other questions related to the presentation? Councilmember Delira?
Yeah, I guess if we decide to delay the application to a future date, not October 1st, how would that impact staff?
The staff would not be in a position to accept applications until the fee is in place. So whatever meeting the council would adopt the fee schedule, then we could start accepting land lease applications.
Any other?
I'm sorry,
Councilmember Parks?
because I have a technical question that I want to ask before the motion is made, because it has to do with that. So to a dollar amount for 250 square feet, that's one land lease. And it was alluded to earlier, if somebody needs another 100 square feet, that would be, if we don't change the number to 300, which is an option. And please, I just want to know how arduous this would be. For that extra 100 square feet, could you then use the CPI formula that had been used in the past for additional requests?
If that is the fee schedule that the city council adopts, we could do that.
Do you anticipate very many businesses needing more than 250 square feet?
I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, any other questions to RJ?
I guess, I'm not sure if it's RJ or to anyone else, but I'm wondering, do we have an option to keep the current land lease system?
Yes,
that would come, that'd be part of this later on, yeah. Okay, so I think we're done with the questions for you. So with that, there is a resolution that staff has proposed, R58-24, resolution adopting a fee schedule for land leases effective October 15th, 2024. With that, I entertain a motion. Anyone would like to make a motion related to the resolution?
I motion to table resolution number R58-24, given the pending questions that council members have, specifically the price of the land lease and the maximum square footage that is allowed.
Second.
With that, discussion. With that, Eric? Councilman Fajarin?
RJ, do you feel like you have the necessary information from council to take back our comments and come back at the future agenda date with the revisions that were requested?
Yes.
Not during this part. So so discussions. So Councilmember Delira?
Yeah, I know that one of the numbers that we were floating around is $50 for 200 or $50 land lease fee. Is there a way to come back with more information if we, I guess, meet all the check marks in terms of legality and, I guess, fairness of being able to offer a price like that?
So what I hear is related to understanding what that $50 fee covers as it relates to the $50 fee, related to the size of the land lease, related to the price comparables with other cities within the region. Councilmember Fajarin?
I would just say that I was just throwing out an example for the 50-25. I would encourage staff to explore what the going market rate is for land leases. As you said, RJ, it can be kind of confusing, or there's no consistency among municipalities.
Mike?
Sure, and then just to add to the benefit of the council's discussion, Thad and I were able to find the Walla Walla amount. And back to my comment about the state auditor, one of the things that we could use is market rates of adjoining cities as a way to look at comparisons, such as Moscow. And if we can make a reasonable argument to Washington versus Idaho and all those, and that's something we'd want to work on with the finance director as well.
I mean, we've got Palouse and Colfax too that we can look at as well.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I just would like to, I'm in favor of including Moscow in our analysis.
So regional.
Yes.
Like that. So with that, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor of tabling this resolution with the understanding there could be a potential change that comes back to us related to it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. We're next on to our...
Thank you, RJ.
Thank you, RJ. On to our next agenda item, which is the 2025 City of Pullman legislative priorities. And we've been working on these priorities. And understand as we look at the legislative priorities, there's two different documents. There's the one-pager, the 2025 City of Pullman draft legislative priorities. That would be the public-facing document that we would be sending out. The second page, which is the talking points, is what we would use internally. That's not something that we would post on the website. We'd only be posting the first page on the website as it relates to our legislative priorities. And so with that, I'd entertain a motion related to the legislative priorities.
Move to adopt the 2025 City of Pullman draft legislative priorities.
Second.
There's a second. With that, any discussion? Councilmember Delira?
Whoops. I still would like to have explicit wording to be included on the first page of the legislative agenda around the Washington College Grant and the Post-Secondary Basic Needs Act. I'm hoping that the wording that I proposed originally would say something like affordable higher education, support accessibility and affordability of higher education by continuing to fund and expand tuition reduction programs like the Washington College Grant and student basic needs programs through the Post-Secondary Basic Needs Act. So I'm hoping for that edit to still be.
So where the edit would fall would be after tuition reduction programs, and then you have like the Washington
College Grant.
College Grant, and then what was the rest of it?
And student basic needs programs through the Post-Secondary Basic Needs Act.
Is there a second?
Second those changes.
So there's a second. So discussion. So I have had discussion back and forth with Councilmember DeLira on this. It was not included in the first, because that was more of the broad one. The Washington College grant is referenced under our talking points. The basic needs, and we've gone back and forth because the basic needs grant is a federal one, whereas there's, so if you want to talk about that piece.
Yeah, so I contacted the Washington Student Achievement Council, an official state agency, to get more information. And the Post-Secondary Basic Needs Act also can be referred to as the Student Basic Needs Act initiatives and programs are already underway. So it not only makes Washington universities, it not only makes Washington universities create a strategic plan, but there have already been basic needs navigators in each and every one of the public universities in Washington state. Also, WSU has already started their pilot program on food security, so this is very much a state program.
With that, any discussion? Councilmember Fajarin?
Again, I'll just support Council Members DeLira's recommendation to add those changes to the legislative priorities. The GPSA and a number of student groups have been avid in having those priorities included in City Council's legislative agenda.
Councilmember Gaither?
I support these changes as well.
I don't think so. Okay, any other discussion? So with that, there is an amendment, and that amendment is to add on the first page after the word programs, so insert there, like the Washington State College grant and the Basic Needs Program, and was
Post-Secondary Basic Needs Act.
for Secondary Basic Needs Act. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes. So back to any discussion related to the priorities. Seeing,
Related to what? Sorry?
huh?
Oh,
We're
excuse
back
me.
on the originals.
Oh, thank you.
Seeing none, all those in favor of passing the 2025 City of Pullman legislative priorities signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you. So next on to discussion. And RJ, you're back up on this one. So this is next steps regarding vacant commercial spaces.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council, once again. This is a discussion item, next steps regarding vacant commercial spaces in the C2 Central Business District. Previously discussed this item on the June 11th and June 25th meeting of the City Council. The June 25th meeting, there was one change to the proposed ordinance. The attached ordinance is on your packet for this evening. The only consensus on an item change was from section 050A from 10 calendar days to 10 business days for the registration of commercial building. So following significant research and drafting efforts, staff remains concerned that the drafting ordinance exceeds the city's scope of authority, and its vulnerability to legal scrutiny will eclipse its intended objective. The existing city nuisance provisions address vacant building safety and health issues. Additionally, the enforcement-related staff capacity and budget impacts on this proposed ordinance have not been fully assessed, but they are expected to be somewhat significant. So staff is seeking guidance from the City Council on next steps. If the City Council elects to proceed with this ordinance, the next step would be a public hearing before the Planning Commission at a regularly scheduled meeting. And after the public hearing, the Planning Commission will adopt a recommendation for the city council's final consideration. Are there any questions I could answer on this item?
So questions for RJ? And this is, he's asking for direction from council. This is a discussion item. Councilmember Fajarin?
So would this be a time to have the conversation with our fellow council members as well? Or is this solely questions for RJ? It's under the discussion items.
Discussion would include everybody.
Great. So given that, and then first off, thank you, RJ. I know you've been very patient with council in constructing this, given our direction. So I would like to bring light the significant information that staff has let us know regarding the enforceability of the the vacant commercial spaces draft that is in front of us. I personally would not feel comfortable putting this forward for staff in the city to consider, given that it has concerns from staff about its enforcement. Given those concerns, I would actually be interested in possibly making this a voluntary registration program, and I'd be interested in what my other council members think about that.
Other discussion? Councilmember Parks?
Can you expand upon what you mean by a volunteer? Are you saying that businesses would voluntarily sign up to or building property owners to comply with the ordinance? Or, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Well, the ordinance would not be present. Excuse me, I may have not thought the full volunteer program out, but I'm saying instead of this proposed vacant commercial spaces policy, it become more collaborative between these business owners. So a volunteer registration program would encourage participation. It wouldn't. We would be working with the business owners instead of trying to enforce policy. A volunteer registration program might encourage city support, connecting resources like making your property look better in order for it to sell faster. Resources like that the city might be able to help connect those business owners with. It would help with data collection about how many vacant buildings that we do have. And so again, I'm looking more for a collaborative way forward rather than just the enforcement of the policy. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weller?
Yeah, I like what you're throwing down there, Eric, but I think, my opinion, look, I'll just say what I know we've all heard before, which is a lot of people are frustrated with vacant buildings. And I can tell you that I know I and every council member can speak for themselves, so I can only speak for myself. I'm very frustrated with it as well. I think, been on here along with quite a few council members for a very long time, and we've had a lot of discussions about vacant buildings. And I want to say thank you, RJ, for going in depth on this. We've had now 2 lawyers look at this, and I think, the challenge that we remain is it's just not, let's put it simply, we would get sued. And I don't think that's a good use of our time to be putting something there which somebody is just going to use against us, which would undoubtedly happen. And I think it's also important to address, past council members have looked into this. A lot of effort has been put into this by past councils. And there are examples, however, those that we've heard about have not been enforced. And for the same reason that if we were to bring it forward, we wouldn't really be able to enforce it. And so I think, this is another situation where, I mean, it is a rock and a hard, whoa. Okay. I needed that, Chief. Thank you. No, it's a good alarm. So one thing that I think is really important, especially with the downtown businesses, is for, especially when there's a new executive director for them to work with each other on how they can work collaboratively. And I think this is something that really they need to be able to work together to address this, because we can't do it from a top-down mentality. So their collaboration with each other is very important. So that's my opinion. So,
Councilmember Wright.
So I think, if I'm recalling our last discussion around this, is one of the things that we wanted to have happen as a result of this discussion that we're in right now is to provide some transparency to our citizens as to what the difficulties truly are in terms of enforcing whatever resolution or ordinance we define here. And because all of us get comments all the time about certain locations, and why aren't you doing anything about it? You need to be doing something. Why can't you tear it down? You need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. So I think there's some educational opportunities here as well to our community members as to why we aren't able to do this and why our enacting an ordinance like this is not sustainable. And I think that's I thought that was part of what we wanted to accomplish in this discussion tonight. Didn't we talk about that?
And I think you did.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Parks? I mean, yeah.
Related to what Councilmember Weller was saying about the businesses and/or the building owners, which are often two different entities. The DPA we had a retreat today, and a facilitator was there, and they said that, in the not too far distant future, we could be viable enough to start offering, and I don't know what the time frame is, so we'll just say several years for now, but we could start offering grants to businesses. It might not be a lot at first, but it would be, here's a dollar amount to put toward a new awning or to help with upkeep or improvements. So that would sort of play into the collaborative approach of downtown. I think in the not too distant future, I think that the DPA could be helpful in that. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Councilmember Guido?
So I just want to get back to Councilmember Wright's point, because I'm at that point too, that I want to be as transparent as possible about why an ordinance like this would not, whatever word you want to use, be enforceable, would be outside the recommended scope of our authority. Going into some legal explanation, I think, would be helpful.
That.
That's picking his words.
Choosing words careful. While he's thinking.
I just want to make sure that the council is asking to waive the attorney-client privilege right now.
I I don't feel comfortable waiving the
That's
attorney.
not what I'm asking, but can you talk about what is the appropriate scope and what are you able to say so that we can be as transparent as possible without violating attorney-client privilege so that the public has a right to understand what our limitations are?
Well, I advise the council, I don't advise the public. And so if you want my legal advice to be the waiver on that to be, or the privilege on that to be waived, I'm happy to go through that. But I just want to make sure that the council, that's what you want.
I'm
Real
not-
quick,
I'm not
I'm not
comfortable with that.
If I can, real quick, I think it's already been said, it's not defensible. We've just, you know, I mean, over the years, we've gone over this over and over and over again. We would be sued. And so, I mean, we don't need to waive any, you know, it's not possible. And we've looked over this as long as I've been on. And Francis has been on longer. And, you know, I can say that it is something that sticks in my throat every single time I hear about, you know, vacant buildings. And there is nothing that I would like to do more than to do something about it. And the best thing that we can do is work with DPA, work with the building owners. I appreciate Ann bringing that up. Work with the building owners to reinvest in our downtown, to invest in our downtown. Mm-hmm. Some of these buildings are owned by families who keep, you know, them vacant for goodness knows why. And I think we need to be able to have a conversation, you know, economic development, the mayor, you know, very personable guy, you know, he can sit down with the building owners and say, look, we've got an awesome new downtown. We want you at the table. Let's do this together. And I think DPA should be a part of that conversation. But there is nothing, and I don't want to be, even with the whole legal thing, a hammer down on, you know, building owners. Yes, there's some people who feel that we should, but we cannot do it even if we wanted to.
So what I am hearing, you know, so RJ, you asked, this was brought for discussion in order to get direction from council. What I'm hearing from council is we would not like to move forward with this ordinance. And that's Councilmember Fajarin.
Thank you. I would like just to reiterate my comments as well. You reflected them correctly, whereas I don't agree on this approach to the ordinance, I would very much like to favor maybe some sort of volunteer registration program. Like many of my fellow council members have said, this has been requested of us ever since I've been in Pullman. And the community would like action, and I feel like the council not doing anything would just send the wrong message.
So I'm seeing, first of all, no, we don't want to move forward with this ordinance. And and the one thing I will say, Eric, is and Councilmember Fajarin, we have looked at this so many different ways, and I'm still trying to grasp how a voluntary program for someone who is closing their doors to voluntary sign up, what that even look like and what it would even, what would it accomplish other, I mean, we have our economic, you know, development within the city that is working and trying to advance things. So I'm not, that program just, I'm still trying to grasp what that would look like and whether anyone that's a vacant building would actually voluntarily sign on. So
Yeah, thank you. Those are all adequate questions. Like I mentioned, I didn't have the full voluntary registration program idea thought out, but I just feel like our constituents have asked us to do something. The initial conversation was we were going to start with the downtown district, but eventually this was supposed to be citywide. So I don't feel like working strictly with the Downtown Pullman Association might. But, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Councilmember Wright?
So I personally think that we need to move beyond this ordinance, since we're all kind of saying that, you know, the enforceability and other issues aren't as appropriate as they should be. That's not the right word. But my other thought is, if we could table, not have this go away, but just table the subject for further discussion, and particularly with the DPA being part of that conversation, and especially now where they are looking at another executive director, and given the time to get that person on board, in place, understanding what some of the complexities and the issues are with this, and how we can work together to further something that would then be something that Eric is suggesting, not voluntary, but an optional discussion. I mean, we've got to start the conversation somewhere. It needs to be completely transparent, and I don't want it to go away, but I do think we need to continue to look at some other alternatives. Again, you know, I know we've looked at other municipalities, we've talked to other municipalities and how they're running with enforcement, and it just, from one community to the next, it varies. And bottom line, seems like nobody is able to enforce compliance with this. So there's a big stumbling block with that right there. But maybe if we have a less heavy-handed approach, we can gain more compliance than otherwise indicated.
Yeah.
Just hopefully a compromising thought.
Yeah, we focus on life safety. Those are the things that are in our purview, is the life safety aspects. It's the fact that it's closed is not something that we have that authority in that way. Councilmember Weller?
Just one last, because I've spoken plenty. You know, Councilmember Fajarin, I am totally with you on the fact that, you know, people have asked. And, you know, I do, like I said, dig the idea of, you know, a volunteer. I'm not sure how that would go. I think also it should be looked at as a pivot. You know, I've learned a lot of this from Francis with his business, you know, entrepreneur stuff. It should be looked at as a pivot. We've hit a brick wall here, you know, we can't do it. But we can pivot and do something like what, you know, Ann is talking about and Pat is talking about, and have conversations and try and do that. And yeah, there's going to be owners that are just like, no, we don't want to. But there's others that will meet with Francis for coffee and meet with the DPA and hear the vision and hear those things, and will be agreeable, and that starts a ball rolling. And so maybe what's best for us when we talk to our, you know, citizens is to say, here's what we are doing. Our economic development director is looking at who owns these buildings, all of the buildings. We are looking at how do we build the bridges and do it that way, you know? So we've hit one, let's pivot to another and keep moving forward. So that's enough for me, I'm done.
Okay, I think we've pretty well finished this discussion. Thank you very much for all of your time and energy in this, and as we've worked through it. With that, I'm looking to Mike, do we have any new business?
We do not, Mayor.
Okay, and there is not an executive session. With that, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.